All right, welcome to a new week in our class on graduate research and design. And this week is June 5th through the 10th, and so you're going to be doing several activities that talk about selecting a sample and measuring instruments. So you're going to have to select these things as you go forth in your research study. Selecting a sample, of course, is important because you have to choose the right people to be a part of your research study, and that's a sample. And then measuring instruments is important as well because whatever instruments you implement with them is going to affect your study as well. You have to make a good instrument or have a good instrument that you use in order to collect good data. So that's selecting a sample and measuring instruments. Next week's we'll start talking about different research methods, starting with survey correlational research and then research for establishing cause and effect and qualitative research methods. We'll talk about those in earnest next time. So you'll want to be looking at which one of those you want to use for your own proposal for this semester. And make sure you understand that one very well. So let's look at some of these ideas just really quick, or at some of these activities that you're going to be doing. Literature review examples. This is just going to encourage you as you continue to read your 4 to 5 articles a week to prepare yourself for the preliminary literature review due soon, which is next week, actually, the 17th. Take a closer look at the literature review section of some of the research articles you are reading. And then kind of look at those and see how they organize the literature that they've been reading, because that's the same way that I want you to organize yours. Now, what might happen though is you might read articles that are way too short for the literature review, and that just happens sometimes because lit review is the first section to kind of be cut short for editorial reasons, just technical reasons and so forth. But oftentimes you'll find good literature reviews or reviews of the literature at the beginning of every article. And so anytime you want to publish research studies, you have to have that first section about literature review, and you have to be able to tell what has already been done in this same area. And that's so we don't reinvent the wheel, so to speak, about these things. So that's something you'll do. You're going to read chapters 5 and 6, chapter 5 on selecting a sample and chapter 6 on selecting measuring instruments. And you'll take the quizzes for those as well. And then there are a few more learning modules, one on evaluating information, one on synthesizing information. And as far as learning modules go, yes, the grades from those do report into the gradebook here in D2L that you receive, but I'm hearing that they are not reporting accurately. So that's an important thing to be aware of. I don't actually, those grades actually do not count up toward your final grade in this class. In fact, they don't even count up to anything in the class. I just left them in there so that I could see who is completing them, making sure you do complete them. But yeah, the grades that those report do not go into your grade in the class anyway. So if it's reporting the wrong grade, that's okay. It won't go to your grade for the class anyway. It's not part of your grade for the class. And then there is a discussion on reviewing the literature. And so you're going to look at what professional organizations or databases or whatever you found helpful to find good quality research reports and respond to other students' posts, as always, in the discussion boards. So that's the activities for this week. Just talking a little bit about sample versus population methods. Let me pull up a website here. So sample versus population. The idea here is that a population is the entire amount of people that you might be interested in knowing something about through your research study. And so if you can consider a sample, or a population, I mean, as this big circle, and whatever group from that people, obviously you probably can't select every single person in a population. Most research studies you have to choose the people that you're going to select. You can't do the entire population of, for instance, teachers in South Dakota or population of teachers in the US if that was your population. So instead you have to choose a sample. You have to find people and select in a good way those people so that you can say, well, this sample does represent the population. So the small circle would be the sample here, and the large circle would be considered the population. And so so you have to kind of, in research studies, prove that the sample that you used for your study is representative of the population. And the ways that you do that are listed in the chapter. There's a lot of different ways of doing it. The most important probably is random selection of people from the sample. If it's not randomly selected, then you can't really make a good argument that you are representing the population very well. But sometimes research is done where it's not randomly selected just because it's not possible to do it that way. Sometimes it's convenience sampled, whoever was willing to respond or whoever was willing to participate. Sometimes, there's a whole bunch of different ways of thinking about this. So it's going to talk about, in the chapter, sampling techniques. And I want you to think about one of those techniques, or two of those at least, to think about how you're going to do that in your own research study proposal so that you can make a good, argument that your sample represents the population of people that you're studying. Now, the next part of the topic this week is on instruments as well. And instruments, is it better to make your own instrument, like a survey or maybe a test, or is it better to choose one that someone else has made? If you thought that it was better to choose one that someone else has made, then you're right. It's usually better to select an instrument from an existing list of instruments than to make your own. And the reason is because the ones that you have, if you select one that's been validated, then you're much better off than if you make one, because if you make an instrument, somebody could argue that that instrument's not a very good quality one unless you've tested it out really well. But if someone else made one and they have a study where they validated the instrument, then you're going to be a lot better off using that one. And so some validation procedures that people go through if you actually make an instrument and validate it, you actually have to run it on many different people, and then you have to do some statistical or mathematic techniques to that instrument to determine whether it is a valid instrument or not. Whereas if someone else has already done that and you can just select their instrument and you can cite the fact that they have a study out there where they did validate the instrument and say that they did that, then you're much better off. So that's something to think about with instruments as well, and it'll talk more about those items as well. Finally, this week, just wanted to give you a heads up that next week the preliminary literature review is due. So you're going to use that annotated reference list or annotated bibliography that you are creating from reading 4 to 5 articles each week. And you're going to make your preliminary lit review. And I've got a couple examples down here. I think those are also, so you can look at those as examples of good, and all those scored fairly well. Or you can go to general class items and example work from the past and look for pre-literature review. Those two, I think it may be the same examples, I'm not sure. And you can pull those up as examples of good lit reviews. The trick with the preliminary literature review, again, is not just to list Smith said this in his study, and then go to the next study, Johnson said this in her study. Instead, you don't go from study to study. You kind of combine them together. You interweave them into a nice narrative that talks about the studies in general. It might say something like, there have been several studies done that look at this specific element. And then you might say, Smith is one example where he looked at X, Y, and Z. By contrast to this, Johnson also looked at X, Y, and Z, but added A to that list. And so you're really weaving them together. You're not just listing one after the other. You're weaving them together in a nice narrative format for the preliminary literature review. So make sure you do that, and that will be due next week. But I just wanted to give you a heads up about that this week. All right, I think that's about it for this week, so good luck.